Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor. Thank you for your continued support. Now, this video was suggested to me by one of you lovely fellow detectives in the comment section on one of my recent videos, and I was immediately compelled by the idea. Ranking the Nancy Drew games in order of difficulty. I personally believe that there is a lot that goes into the difficulty of a game, and I also believe that those factors usually are not the same from detective to detective. For example, some detectives have just never been a fan of common puzzle types like Sudoku or slider puzzles, while others might find them perfectly fine and simple. Others may really excel at exploration-based logic puzzles, while others will find them far too vague. All of this meant that I didn't feel qualified to rank the difficulty of the games on my own, and so arrived the inception of another crowdsourcing Nancy Drew experiment. I posted a survey in the channel Discord asking fellow detectives to rate the games according to 5 levels of difficulty: very easy, easy, medium, hard, and very hard. If you'd like to participate in these experiments in the future, the channel Discord as well as the Instagram and Patreon are all linked in the description below. I have combined this data with my own personal rankings in order to sort the games into each of these 5 categories. This was incredibly fun to do. I always love looking through the data and trying to figure out why certain games end up being in each level of difficulty. So, let's begin by looking at where all of the games landed, and then spend some time analyzing what makes a game easy versus difficult, and what level of difficulty tends to make for the best game. My hope is that this list will also act as an informal guide in helping you determine which Nancy Drew game you may want to purchase or play, depending on the level of difficulty. To start, the following Nancy Drew games were ranked as being very easy by a majority of fellow detectives: Secrets Can Kill and Secrets Can Kill Remastered. That's it. This makes sense to me though, because these games are extremely similar. One was the first game in the Nancy Drew series and understandably pretty simple. The other is a remastered version of that same game with a minor tweak to the puzzles and the structure of the game. As such, these games, or this game, depending on how you look at it, is the only very easy entry in the series according to detectives, likely due to the minimal exploration, the minimal straightforward puzzles, and the short game time. Next, the following Nancy Drew games were ranked as being easy by a majority of fellow detectives: Stay Tuned for Danger, Message in a Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, The Final Scene, The Haunted Carousel, Secret of the Old Clock, Creature of Kapu Cave, Trail of the Twister, and Midnight in Salem. The first 6 of these games are all from the early classical era of Nancy Drew games, and honestly, I think any of them would be great first games for a new detective just learning the ropes. These classics are on the easier side of things, because the puzzles are pretty minimal, straightforward, and logic-based, and usually, if you get stuck, help is just a phone call away, with Bess, George, Ned, or the Hardy Boys able to give clever, but not spoilery hints. These games are more exploration and story-based, rather than being ultra-puzzle heavy. 2 of the easy games, Creature of Kapu Cave and Trail of the Twister, are from the Renaissance era. Creature of Kapu Cave does have fewer puzzles and limited exploration, which means detectives are a lot less likely to get lost. Trail of the Twister has a lot of puzzles, but they're all pretty much one and done. While I personally was rather shocked to see Trail of the Twister considered easy by fellow detectives, I can see how the fairly linear style coupled with more simple locations could make this game seem pretty straightforward. The last game on this easy list, Midnight in Salem, is the newest Nancy Drew game, and is likely considered easy because of the game being primarily dialogue-driven. The game tells Nancy what to do at all times. go home, go to the museum, go to the graveyard. And the few puzzles that she encounters are mostly doable. Now we have the following Nancy Drew games that were ranked as being of medium difficulty by a majority of fellow detectives: Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Danger on Deception Island, Secret of Shadow Ranch, Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, Danger by Design, Warnings at Waverly Academy, Alibi in Ashes, and The Shattered Medallion. This particular list is characterized primarily by games in the late classical era, or what some detectives refer to as the Golden Age, as well as scattered games from the Renaissance era. 2 games from the modern era, Alibi in Ashes and The Shattered Medallion, were also included. Ignoring The Shattered Medallion for a moment, I think it's interesting to note that almost all of these games are frequently noted as some of the most successful amongst the series: Danger on Deception Island, Secret of Shadow Ranch, Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, and Warnings at Waverly Academy. Almost all of these games, again, ignoring The Shattered Medallion, very successfully balanced story with puzzles. This means that the plots of these mysteries stand out, and there are just enough puzzles within them to present a nice challenge without overwhelming detectives. They are of medium difficulty precisely because of the definition of medium. They aren't too hard, but they also aren't too easy. It's a Goldilocks situation, because a lot of these games are just right. Next, we have the list of Nancy Drew games that were considered hard by a majority of fellow detectives, including Secret of the Scarlet Hand, White Wolf of Icicle Creek, Legend of the Crystal Skull, The Phantom of Venice, The Captive Curse, Ghost of Thornton Hall, Labyrinth of Lies, and Sea of Darkness. This difficulty only includes one classical era game and is heavily skewed towards Renaissance era and modern era Nancy Drew games. This makes a lot of sense given our previous discussions of the Nancy Drew games. As time went on, the developers made a steady shift from exploration and story focus to a more dense puzzle focus. This doesn't necessarily mean that the stories became any less strong, but it does mean that the games became longer and more difficult, as the inclusion of much more complicated puzzles became something of a norm. Within this level, we have a few games with some notorious puzzles, like Fox and Geese and The Tunnels of Venice, but really these games are more accurately characterized as having a lot of puzzles with a generally high level of difficulty, though the majority are not impossible or infamous. And finally, we have the list of Nancy Drew games that were ranked as being very difficult by a majority of fellow detectives: Curse of Blackmore Manor, Haunting of Castle Malloy, Ransom of the Seven Ships, Shadow at the Water's Edge, Tomb of the Lost Queen, and The Deadly Device. Once again, we have one late classical era game, but primarily late Renaissance era and modern era games at this level of difficulty. Almost all of these games have at least one and sometimes multiple notorious puzzles: the spinning rooms of Blackmore Manor, the colorful ferret box and chemical puzzle of Castle Malloy, the colorful Sudoku and monkey madness of Dread Isle, and the monster Sudoku and monster nonogram of the Ryokan Hiei. Tomb of the Lost Queen and The Deadly Device don't necessarily have one puzzle that gets frequently singled out by fellow detectives as being truly heinous, but they are consistently quite difficult and are almost constantly presenting detectives with challenges, making them very hard overall. So now that we've seen where the games might fall according to difficulty, let's analyze a bit what makes a game difficult and what makes for the ideal level of difficulty. I have alluded to this already, but perhaps rather obviously, the difficulty of a game is highly correlated to the number of puzzles that the game includes. The more puzzles a game has, the more likely that the game is considered difficult. Additionally, if a game includes a higher number of true puzzles, such as Sudoku, nonograms, slider puzzles, or math puzzles, for example, then the game is more likely to be identified as hard or very hard. In contrast, games that include more of what I like to call natural puzzles are more likely to be considered easy or medium. Natural puzzles are typically disguised as part of the plot, and therefore rely more on exploring, finding answers, and logic-based solutions. Think the astrology-themed lock in Message in a Haunted Mansion, the bubblegum solution in the final scene, or the royal flush locks in Danger on Deception Island. And can we determine what level of difficulty is the best when it comes to a Nancy Drew game, or even a video game in general? As I mentioned before, just looking at our data, a vast number of consistent fan favorite games sit right in the middle, at the medium difficulty level. While individual detectives may have a game or two in the outlier areas, easy, hard, or very hard, I think it's pretty safe to say that a medium difficulty game is more likely to be beloved by many and appealing to most. When you think about the concept of gaming, this makes a great deal of sense. A game that is too easy for you might be fun for a time, but it is less likely to have staying power and may become boring after a while. Its replay value may not be as high unless you are particularly drawn to the story. In contrast, a game that is too difficult for you is just going to end up being aggravating. You may need to rely too heavily on a walkthrough, which breaks your immersion and that sense of accomplishment, or it may just end up feeling tedious and demoralizing. I've definitely had those moments where a Nancy Drew puzzle has had me stuck for hours, and then I end up feeling like I need to rage quit and stop playing. Too much difficulty has the potential to suck some enjoyment out of the game. But at the same time, it can also lead to a greater sense of victory and accomplishment in the end. But long story short, it's looking like balanced, medium difficulty games that give equal attention to plot, character development, setting, as well as puzzles are some of the best. So there you have it, fellow detectives. My thoughts on the easiest and the most difficult games in the Nancy Drew series. But what do you think? Which games are the easiest and which are the hardest? What makes a game easy or difficult for you? Do you agree with our crowdsourced rankings? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comments section down below. And if you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.